Today's session is one that I really enjoy. It's on the third ingredient in the training scale, and that's connection. Now, if you remember, I already had a short session on contact, because really that third ingredient in the training scale, if you see it written, is contact/connection. But the reason I wanted to separate those two things is that I wanted you to focus on the quality of your contact, because you really can't ask your horse to connect. Another way of saying that is to come on the bit. Another way of saying that is to come round. You really can't ask him to connect unless you have good quality contact, a contact that's sympathetic and inviting. So that's why I split that third ingredient in the training scale into two sections. The first one being contact, and now we're going to talk about connection. And we have my buddy, Melissa McLaren, here to be my demonstrator. And we have, now this is kind of a pompous name, but we have Sigmund Freud. And because he, as you can see, he's not a very pompous horse. He's quite humble. He's a Haflinger. We call him Ziggy, but his professional name is Sigmund Freud. And I particularly wanted to use Ziggy for this lesson because a lot of times people watch the lessons and they watch the fancy warm bloods and they think, oh yeah, well that's fine for that horse because that horse came out of the womb on the bit. That horse came out of the womb round, and I just have an ordinary horse, and how can I expect to put my ordinary horse on the bit? And that's why I want you to see with a horse like Ziggy that with the aids that I'm going to teach you, we can easily put the horse on the bit. And that's the key word there. There is an aid. A lot of times people think it's very, very mysterious, don't they, Melissa? They think it's mysterious in order to put the horse on the bit. Because sometimes, you know, I'll go to a clinic and I'll say, well, how do you put your horse on the bit? And people will say, well, sometimes I do this and sometimes I do that. And I think, well, then sometimes your horse will do this and sometimes your horse will do that. You need, as you develop your alphabet, as we've talked about in the use of the aids, and your language, you need to have a specific word. And that specific word tells the horse to do one thing, such as the aid for a canter to part tells the horse to canter. An aid for leg yielding tells him to go sideways. And the aid that I'm going to teach you today says to the horse, be on the bit. So if you want your horse to be round, you have to be able to give him this aid. Otherwise, he might come on the bit for moments. And what I mean by that is if you have a lot of the foundational ingredients in line, in other words, you're going forward in a regular rhythm and your horse is straight, you might find that for moments your horse will adopt the round frame on his own. But every time you go to do something that changes his balance, like a transition from gait to gait, or a transition from left bend to right bend, or a transition from a single track movement to a sideways movement, because a transition causes a change in the way the horse uses his balance, he could very well lose his balance. So you need a very specific aid, a very specific word to tell your horse to come on the bit. And here's how I want you to think about this, because a lot of times people think that the aid I'm teaching them is an exercise, and it's not an exercise, it is an aid. Think of the aid that I'm going to teach you in a second. Think of it in this way. If you were doing training level test 1 and you were doing a 20-meter circle at C and you were trotting, and the test said when you pass the letter C, you're going to pick up the canter, but you decide that you're not going to give any aids. You're trotting along here and you're getting closer and closer to C, and you say, I'm not going to give the aid for the canter transition. I'm just going to sit up here and I'm going to wish and I'm going to hope and I'm going to pray that all by himself, with no help from me, my horse is going to pick up the right lead canter when I pass the letter C. Now, Melissa, what do you think the chances of that are? It's pretty slim. Slim to, well, not even, it isn't slim to none, because he could trip in a hole, but then of course he'd probably pick up the other lead, wouldn't he? Yeah. So you need to have a specific aid. You want him on the bit, you give him the aid to be on the bit. So now I need to discuss the aid. Now don't scream, I can hear you now. The aid to put the horse on the bit is called a half halt. Don't panic, I'm going to break it down, I'm going to explain it. The reason we give a half halt is to bring the horse to a more perfect state of balance. And when a horse is hollow, he's not connected, his back end is not connected to his front end, he's not in very good balance. So we need an aid to bring the horse to a more perfect state of balance. He can also not be in good balance if he's leaning on an outside shoulder, if he's heavy on the forehand, if his haunches are swinging left or right, or they're going out the back door. There's all different ways that horses can express their lack of balance. So anytime you're dealing with a balance issue, you need to think half halt, like a knee-jerk reaction. Oh, this is a loss of balance, I need to give a half halt. So that's the cure for any balance diseases. But the reason that the half halt, I think, is the most misunderstood concept in riding is that there is one generic over-the-counter half halt. And that is, if you read in the books, that is the momentary closure of seat, leg, and hand. Boom, boom. That's the definition of a half halt. And that actually is a very good half halt. And you'll find that we use that when we talk about collection, the third ingredient in the training scale. But think about it. You have 2 seat bones, you have 2 legs, and you have 2 reins. And you know from other sessions that we have different actions with seat, leg, and hand. We can vibrate a rein, we can turn the key in the lock, we can use a driving seat, we can use a retarding seat. So we have a lot of potential combinations of seat, leg, and hand. And it's the particular way you combine seat, leg, and hand that allows different versions of that generic half halt I just described, different versions of that half halt to create different qualities in the horse's body. So getting back to connection, when you think about your training scale, connection is 3rd, collection is 6th. So the first version of the half halt that we want to give is what I say, it's just a teaching term that I use, the connecting half halt. It tells you the purpose for riding that half halt. We're going to connect the horse and put him on the bit. I do want to make one other point about half halts, however. The word half halt is a misnomer. There is no stopping. There is no halt in a half halt. In fact, you'll see when I go over the aids, I want you to think of the half halt as a half go. That we always add hind legs, we always add power when we give a half halt. So take the word half halt out of your vocabulary, call it a half go, so that you really think about riding the horse from behind. And basically, that's what you're doing when you give your connecting half halt. You're asking the horse to come energetically from behind, over his back, through his neck, into your hand, where you can then recycle all that power back to the hind legs. Now I'm going to turn Ziggy a little bit sideways here, Melissa, so that we can start to think about the aids. I'm going to break the aids down, how you use your seat and your leg and your hand, but what you also need to understand is one of the things that differentiates the connecting half halt from a collecting half halt, let's say, is the length of time that you give it. It's a long half halt. Generally, we hold it about 3 seconds, the length of time it takes you to inhale and exhale. And you could count 1, 2, 3 for those 3 seconds if you want, but I've had riders recently, rather than counting 1, 2, 3, count out loud, add, add, add during the 3 seconds of the half halt. And the reason that I want them to do that is that will get their minds tuned into the hind legs, that they're adding hind legs, adding hind legs, adding hind legs. It still lasts 3 seconds, and the third add is almost a little mental signal for you to soften, because you're not done giving a half halt until you soften at the finish of the half halt. So the third add is your signal to soften, but we keep the half halt on for the full 3 seconds. Now let's talk about the ingredients that make up the half halt. Remember I said that every half halt contains the feeling of a medium gait. Well, the aid that you use for the medium gait, whether you're asking for a medium trot or a medium canter, hi Tycho, you're going to demonstrate for us too, Tycho's going to be my other assistant here, is to close both calves. If you're in working trot and you want to lengthen, or you're in collected canter and you want to go to a medium canter or extended canter, the signal for that is to, she's okay, she can stay here, is to close both legs. Okay, so you close both legs, and it's a steady close for the 3 seconds. It's almost like squeezing toothpaste out of a tube. It's add, add, add. It's not on, off for the 3 seconds. Now, obviously, if your horse is behind your leg when you go to close your legs, and he's not listening to the closure of your two legs, you have to put him in front of your driving aids, as we've done before. So if the horse is not reactive, if you don't feel that surge from behind when you close your two legs, give him a couple taps with the whip or a couple little bumps with your leg. But then remember, we never leave a forward issue with a punishment. If you've had to punish him because he's been lazy and not listening, you always go back and test with a light aid so that we know that he's energetically forward from the two legs. So that's the common denominator between asking for a medium gait and asking for a connecting half halt. The two calves close. Now, let's say we're circling to the right, since we're sort of headed in that direction now. If Melissa were to close both of her legs and Ziggy was in front of her leg, he would charge off into the medium gait. But we don't want him to express all that energy forward over the ground. Instead, we don't want the speed to change either faster or slower. We want to capture, contain, and recycle all that power back to the hind legs. So a moment after she closes both legs, just as she feels he's going to surge into the lengthening, she's going to take her outside hand and close it in a fist. Okay, a steady fist. It's not just a supporting rein. She's going to close it in a fist. And that's really the heart of the half halt. That's what gives you the longitudinal bend over the horse's back, those two sets of aids. Closing the two legs, closing the outside hand for 3 seconds, add, soften. And with every horse it's a little bit different. If the horse slows down, you might have used too much hand, or the horse is behind your leg. If the horse speeds up, you need more influence of the outer hand, because basically the speed should not change, just the frame of the horse should change. Now, the other thing you need to think about is 3 seconds is a really long time. So if I were to close my outer hand, my left hand, in a fist for 3 full seconds, watch what happens to Ziggy's neck. 1, 2, 3. You see how he bends his neck to the left? And in order for a half halt to go through, the horse must be straight. So we have one aid left over. That's the inside rein. And what we do with the inside rein is we give little squeezes and releases on the inside hand. And that has two functions. The primary function is to prevent the horse from bending the neck to the outside. In other words, to keep the horse's neck straight. The secondary function is when you move the bit in the horse's mouth, the horse chews and he flexes in the jaw. But remember, I said that's a minor function. The more important combination of aids are your two legs through your outside hand, which gets the horse round over his back. And then the icing on the cake is that flexion in the jaw. Now, to the naked eye, all of those aids happen simultaneously. You close both legs, you close your outer hand in a fist, twinkle, twinkle, twinkle. But if we had freeze frame photography, we would see those 3 sets of aids being done one right after the other. Okay, so that, and what happens with a lot of riders is they use the hands before they use the legs. And that's sort of like picking up the telephone before it rings. Like, why would you do that? Because nobody's there. You didn't call me yesterday, Melissa. So first you close both legs, freeze frame photography, and just as the horse feels he's going to surge into the medium gait, you close that outer hand in a fist, and just before he feels like he's going to bend his neck to the outside, you twinkle, twinkle, twinkle on the inside rein. So to the naked eye, it appears like you're giving all those aids at the same time. But you are giving them in that order. Legs first, then outside hand, then inside hand. Something else I was going to say about that. I'm sure it'll come to me as we practice here. Oh, I know what I was going to say. Your seat is part of your driving aids, but when you're first teaching the horse the connecting half halt, don't worry about your seat. We'll add that later as the horse starts to understand the language. For now, just use your legs as your driving aids. Now, what I do with horses that are uneducated, that don't know the half halt, is I teach the half halt in 3 parts, 3 stages. The first, I want to check that when I close my legs, boom, the horse goes. The second step is the most important step for you to understand, because when I talked about the use of the aids, we talked about the alphabet and the letters of the alphabet being used separately. Legs mean go and rein means outside rein means stop. Then suddenly you put those 2 things together for a half halt and the horse goes, hey. That's exactly what he says, right, Ziggy? He said, hey, I can't stop and go at the same time. So he usually stops. And he can express stopping when you close your outside hand in any number of ways. He can slow down, that's the most obvious. You can shorten his neck. He can swing his hindquarters out. He can push backwards with the hind legs. He can take shorter steps with the hind legs. He can express that in any number of ways. So in order, knowing that horses are going to say, generally, I can't stop and go at the same time, so I'm going to stop. The second stage of teaching the horse the half halt is to get a lengthening or a medium, motoring along, and while you're going really fast, she goes, oh, I don't have a lengthening, and that's all right. While you're going really fast, then you add the hand part of the half halt. And while you're doing that, you're going to watch his neck. And all his neck has to do is come either a ½ inch lower or a ½ inch longer. Okay, and as soon as it does that, then slow him down and tell him he's a good boy, because the only way his neck will come a ½ inch longer or a ½ inch lower is if he's stepped through your closed outside hand rather than stopping at it. So he's starting to understand at that point that the outside hand is a wall, but it's an invisible wall, and he can step through it. So he doesn't have to come completely on the bit, he just has to come a little bit longer and a little bit lower on his neck. So that's the second stage of teaching the half halt. The third stage is just to be in a working gait and just give your normal 3-second half halt in the working gait, and we look to see that the horse's frame has changed. But I want you to see where we're starting from first. So Melissa, just go and trot a circle with him very hollow. I do want you to have him on contact. I don't want the reins to be loopy. Yeah, and then just pick up a rising trot. Good. All right, so this is a hollow horse, and without giving the half halt, this is how the horse would choose to carry himself. Take an imaginary tape measure and run it between his ears, over his top line to the top of his tail. Now take another imaginary tape measure, run it underneath his throat latch, underneath his neck. You can see he has a big under muscle underneath his neck, under his belly, up to his tail. You can see right now that the tape measure, you can walk now, the tape measure on the underline of the horse is much longer than the tape measure over the top line. So we know that he's not carrying himself in a very athletic or productive way. He'll be much more athletic and much more of a unit when we put him on the bit and make him round by connecting his hind legs to his front legs. Now Ziggy really doesn't have a lengthening, but what we're really looking for when we go through these 3 steps is we're looking for a reaction to Melissa's legs. When she asks him to lengthen in the trot, I want to see that he's hot off your leg, and if he isn't, you can give him a couple little kicks, or you can give him a tap, 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 then slow him down and we ask again. It doesn't have to be a real lengthening. It's more a mental thing, that he's mentally thinking forward. And just move your circle down a little bit this way, because I want to be sure the camera can get all of the horse in. So having a straight line contact with both sides of his mouth, don't let the rein be loopy. Pick up rising trot on a circle between R and S. So rising trot, good. So this is going to be step 1 to teaching the horse how to come on the bit. The first thing you're going to do is just keep your hands exactly the way they are. You're not going to use your hands except to steer him around the circle. And lightly close both legs and do Ziggy's version of a lengthening. And if he doesn't go, then give him a tap, tap, tap. Tap, 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 tap. Good, that was fine, even if he canters. But we never leave a forward question with a punishment. Slow him down now, slow, 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 slow. Slow, good. And retest, close your legs and do Ziggy's version of a lengthening. Yep, come, come. There, that's all right, that was better. Try it once more. If you don't have the engine, there's nothing to contain and recycle. Slow down first, slow, good girl, and then lightly close your legs and off you go. Good, tell him good boy. Good, now we're gonna go to step 2, which is to stay in the lengthening. Keep powering around in the lengthening. His neck is a little too bent to the inside. Straight neck, there you go. Stay in the lengthening, close your outer hand in a fist, twinkle, 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 inner hand, and watch his neck, Melissa. As soon as it comes a little bit longer, keep the lengthening. A little longer or a little lower. There he goes. Now slow down and tell him good boy. That was the beginning of step 2. Now he didn't come completely round, but all we want to know is that he doesn't see the closed outside hand as a deterrent for coming on the bit. So let's do step 2 again. Lengthen. Good. Get into the lengthening, stay in the lengthening. Close your outer hand in a fist. Twinkle, 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 inner hand. Keep doing it, keep doing it, keep doing it, keep doing it. Outer hand is more important than inner hand. Keep lengthening. Watch his neck. There, he's starting to lower it. Good. And slow down and tell him, good boy. Good. Beautiful. We're going to do that second step one more time. So you want to keep the lengthening. Once he's in the lengthening, keep doing the hand part of the half halt. So lengthen. Good. Close your outer hand. Watch his neck. Keep lengthening. Watch his neck. There he goes. And slow. And tell him, good boy. Beautiful. Now we're going to go to the third step, which is to just stay in the working trot. And you're going to count nice and loud since you don't have a microphone on. When you give the half halt, you're going to say add, add, add. As you're closing both calves, closing your outer hand in a fist, and twinkle, twinkle, twinkle on your right hand. So when you're ready, go ahead. And soften and allow his neck to fall down. That was lovely. That half halt went through about 50%. Come with another one. Close your legs. And soften. And yeah, and that one went through about 75%. And then build on that, Melissa. Give another one. Close both legs. Close your left hand. And soften. Good. And you see that Ziggy's top line measurement is getting rounder and rounder. And give another one. And soften. Now that was very nice in the change of the frame, but the last add was more of a subtraction of hind legs. Could you feel that? Yeah. So if he slows down, give him a little tap while you're giving the half halt. One more time. Good. And soften. That was well done. And you see how much rounder he is now. That was beautiful. So walk and pet him. That was lovely. Give him a little break. Good. So those are the 3 stages that I like to use in order to teach a young or an educated horse the aid for coming on the bit. First, I have to know that when I close my legs, boom, he shoots forward like someone poked him with a red-hot poker. The second step is to explain to him that even though my outside hand is closed, it doesn't mean stop. He can step through my outside hand. And when he steps through my outside hand, that's when he'll be round in his back. So I take out a little insurance policy. And the insurance policy is to already get the lengthening motoring along, and then after I know I have those extra miles per hour, then I close my outer hand and twinkle, twinkle, twinkle inner hand. And I just wait to see the neck get a little bit longer, a little bit lower. And you could see Ziggy was a great demonstrator here because he stepped through Melissa's hand, outside hand, in stages. He came a tiny bit round, and then a little bit more round, and then very round when she kept the RPMs up on the final half halt. But you have to be aware of those shades of gray. The fact that he started to lengthen his head and neck was enough for her to cease the aids at that point and reward him because he was beginning to step through her closed outside hand, and then we build on that. So come up closer so you can hear me, Melissa. You can keep walking if you want, but I just want you to be able to hear me. Another way to describe these 3 sets of aids that make up the connecting half halt is that they're a combination of the driving aids, the bending aids, and the rein of opposition maintained for approximately 3 seconds, the length of time it takes you to inhale and exhale. And Ziggy, yes, you did beautifully, and I'm sorry I don't have any sugar. Ziggy did very, very well, but let's say you're riding a horse that just isn't getting it. There are exercises that you can do to help teach the horse what this combination of aids should do to his body, and we're going to do one of those now. I'm going to describe it to you first. She's going to go on a large circle, the width of the arena, and then she's going to accelerate, and meaning she's going to close both legs, which you remember is one of the ingredients that makes up the connecting half halt. She's going to accelerate onto a small circle. So Melissa, if your large circle is like on this track, you would pick a point somewhere along the arc of the circle and accelerate onto a smaller circle, close both legs, turn onto the smaller circle, and then soften when you go back to the larger circle. Now think about what this exercise does. It has all of the 3 sets of aids. You're very attentive, Sigmund Freud. All of the 3 sets of aids that make up the connecting half halt. By virtue of the small size of the figure, you have more bending aid because the arc of the circle is smaller. By virtue of the small circle, you have more outside rein because it's the outside rein that defines the size of the circle. And if you add that little step of closing your legs and thinking, I'm going to accelerate onto the little circle, you have all 3 sets of aids that make up the connecting half halt. Driving aids, bending aids, rein of opposition. And then coming back to the 20-meter circle, that's your moment of softening. That's when you're done giving your half halt. Remember, you're not done giving a half halt until you soften. So if in time the half halt lasted from here to here, here's the 3 seconds of putting the half halt on, and here's the softening, and then you're done giving a half halt. So let's do that in the rising trot. Okay, so go on a 20-meter circle, sort of in the same place you were in before, in a working trot, and then you're going to just pick some point around the circle without overbending his neck to the inside, a little more outside rein. Good. And you're going to accelerate onto a 10-meter circle. So when you're ready, close both legs, close your outer hand in a fist, and twinkle, twinkle, twinkle. Outer hand in a fist, left hand makes a fist. Accelerating onto that circle and soften. As you come back, well done you, and tell him, good boy, that was super. Beautiful. Good, and then you're going to pick another point on the circle and do the same thing. Not too much bend in the neck to the inside, just uniform bend from pole to tail. Outer hand in a fist, inner hand forward so you don't overbend the neck, closing the outer hand, and soften everything. And allow him to have, good, Melissa, what we call falling down neck. Beautiful. Good, that's super. That's an image to have in your mind, this image of falling down neck. One more time. Close your legs, accelerate onto a little circle, close your outer hand in a fist, keep your inner hand forward as you vibrate, and soften everything. Good. Now, one of the tests of the honesty of your half halt is if you've given a good half halt, at the finish of the half halt, you could open your fingers and the horse would chew the reins out of your hand. So I just want you to give a 3-second half halt like we've been doing. And if you think that your half halt has gone through, in other words, it's put him on the bit, then open your fingers and let's see what Ziggy does with his head and neck. Let's see if he stretches down to the ground. So count out loud, add, add, add. As you close both legs, close your outer hand. Count it out loud. Now wait and open your fingers. Don't straighten your arms, just open your fingers. Good. Open your fingers more. Let him take as much as he wants. So he put his neck out at about 50%. So that half halt went through about 50%. Shorten the rein. We're going to try again. We're going to have a little more addition of hind legs, and I think you'll have it. So if you have to touch him with the whip while you give the half halt, and count the half halt. Good, and open the fingers of both hands. Good, and allow him to chew the reins out of your hand. Good. Allow the neck to come down. Good, keep him a little bit flexed to the inside. Shorten the rein up again. Try once more. So that one went through about 60%, and this tells you what you need to do with your half halt in order to get a 100% answer. You need to vary one of the 3 ingredients in the half halt. I think with Ziggy, it's usually the driving aid. Yeah, she says. Okay, so more driving is if you're doing medium trot, good. Close your outer hand, count, add, add. Don't let him slow down, no subtraction. Let his neck fall down and then open your fingers. Good. That was better. Give him a little more rein than that. He's ready to go. He was ready to go after that half halt. Good, and tell him good boy, and keep him a little bit flexed to the inside. Good, there we go. So that half halt went through about 75%. Good. So the main thing with Ziggy as far as switching one of the ingredients or adjusting one of the ingredients in the half halt is he needs more surge from behind. And as Melissa added more power, more power, more power, you could see that he was starting to stretch toward her hand a little bit more and a little bit more and a little bit more. But it's important that you do the tests of the half halt, because as you saw earlier, Ziggy came into what appeared to be quite a nice round frame. But we can see from the tests he wasn't 100% on the bit. On the bit is not a black or white thing. You're either on the bit or not on the bit. There are degrees of being connected. And so this test of giving your half halt, add, and then opening the fingers and seeing if the horse immediately chews the rein out of your hand and goes forward and down with his head and neck is one of the tests of the half halt. Another test of the half halt is that, think about it, I told you the heart of the half halt was the driving aids through the outside hand, the closed outside hand, also called the rein of opposition. So if you successfully connect the engine to that outside hand, you should be able to do what's called Überstreichen and give a clear release on the inside rein for 2 or 3 strides, and nothing should change. Okay, and what I mean by that is the speed shouldn't change, the frame of the horse shouldn't change, but mostly if the horse, what you'll see if the horse isn't connected into the outside rein is that he'll bend his neck to the outside. And once again, that's a thing of degree. It's not that the half halt goes through 100% or doesn't go through at all. If it doesn't go through at all, when you put a loop, in this case in your right rein, he'll boing with his neck to the outside. If it's gone through like 50%, like your first half halt before, and you do Überstreichen on the inside rein, maybe his neck will go 3 or 4 inches to the outside. If it's gone through 90% and you give that inside rein, maybe he'll just counterflex. But when you can give that inside rein and ride him for 2 or 3 strides and the flexion and bend stays the same because you're on a circle, and in order to be straight on a circle he has to be bent. If he stays bent and flexed to the inside when you give that inside rein, then you know your half halt has gone through 100%. And while they're taking a little rest here, I want to repeat what she did before. She adjusted one of the 3 ingredients that makes up the half halt. She added more driving, and that's what Ziggy did. When you do this other test, one by one, because I don't know which ingredient has to be more influential, you might have more inner rein. You might still close both legs but have more inner leg. Or it might be that your closed outside fist has to be a little firmer, more influential. But one by one, pick one of the 3 sets of aids that make up the connecting half halt, adjust it a little bit, make it more influential, and then do one of the 2 tests. Would you rather do that in the walk or in the trot?
Probably the trot.
Okay, so yeah, I think with him, because the energy is an issue, the trot's probably a good idea. So come in the rising trot. And when you're ready, power, yeah, not too much bend in the neck to the inside. Make sure that your outer hand is back, that's beside your inner hand, that it hasn't crept forward. Beautiful, good energy. So when you can supple him a little bit to the inside, Melissa, that will help your half halt. Bend him 7 inches to the inside and then straighten him. Don't open and close your fingers when you do that. Just bend his neck and straighten him. And bend his neck and straighten him. Good. Remember, suppleness is the 2nd ingredient in the training scale. Connection is 3rd. So if Ziggy isn't supple, he's going to run into his own body when she goes to give the half halt. So that helped, didn't it, Melissa? So now count your half halt out loud, and at the finish of the half halt, put a loop in your inner rein. And give the inner rein. Okay, now you need to be sure that you don't put your outer hand forward at the same time, because we don't want his neck to go down. We just want to see if his neck turns to the left. So keep your left elbow on your waist when you test. And that half halt was a little bit subtract, subtract, subtract. You felt that. Okay, so if you have to touch him with the whip when you give the half halt, then you do. And keep your outer elbow on your waist when you do the test. So when you're ready, come again. Good. Now keep your outer elbow, give your inner elbow. Give your inner arm. More, yeah, more. Okay, that's what I want to see. Now he just brought his face a little bit to the outside, which tells me that half halt went through about 80%. But I think that, you needed to give a little sooner, and I think you would have had him. You waited too long. You want to give it Überstreichen is a clear release of the rein. We want to see that loop. So ride the half halt exactly like you just did it, because you had a beautiful addition of hind legs. We're going to supple him first, though. You had a beautiful addition of hind legs, but then when you're finished with the half halt, you're going to right away give away that inside rein. So 3 supples, good. That's the second ingredient in your training scale. Count your half halt. Beautiful, give the rein. Super, 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 walk and pet him. Now, it wasn't 100%, but it was like 97%, because he just brought his face so that he was in a neutral position, as we've talked about before in our language, a 0 position where his chin was in the middle of his chest. He didn't maintain the +1 flexion, meaning his face was 1 inch to the inside. But the fact that that was that much better than the one before, in terms of him staying at least straight with his body along the arc of the circle, even though he just slightly lost the flexion, says that that half halt connected him better into that outside rein. So you can bring him up here and pet him. That was awesome, Melissa. The thing that you need to realize is that a lot of horses have very nicely shaped necks. And so we can be faked out. We can be fooled by our horses. They can arch their necks and we go, oh, my horse is on the bit. And then you go and you do a transition and your horse throws his head in the air and you think, well, I don't understand why my horse comes off the bit in a transition, because he was on the bit before I asked. Well, sometimes the horse is doing what I call posing on the bit. He's arching his head and neck, but his back is low. And so once you understand how to put these 3 sets of aids together to give the half halt, you want to know that your horse can pass both of those tests, where you give the 3-second half halt, close both legs, close your outer hand in a fist, twinkle, twinkle, twinkle. At the finish of the half halt, you open the fingers of both hands. And if the horse already has this longitudinal bend over his back, it's a natural extension of that for him to chew the rein out of your hand and go toward the ground. The second test shows that you have connected the horse into the outside rein. If you can ride him for 2 or 3 strides without the inner rein at all, and he doesn't counterflex or counterbend. And that gives you information so that you can ride to a higher standard. Because Ziggy looked like he was in a nice round little frame there. But we don't want to settle for 97%, do we? We want 100%. So what Melissa would need to do to go from 97% to 100% is just, I don't have a crystal ball, so I don't know which aid it is, but I'm always suspicious it's the legs with this horse, the driving aids. You pick one of the 3 sets of aids, the driving aids, or your rein of opposition, or your bending aid, and you increase the influence of that set of aids, and then you do the test and see if you get a better answer. So that's our overview of connection, the third ingredient in the half halt, the third ingredient in the training scale. And remember, I said for most of you with your training in first level horses, you're going to live in those first 3 ingredients in the training scale, rhythm being number 1, suppleness being number 2, and connection being number 3. Now notice, because they were in that order, Ziggy started off, he was a little bit stiff in his trot. So Melissa said, oh, I can't go to connection, I have to drop down to a lower common denominator. In the training scale, she dropped down to suppleness. She did our 7 and a 1 and a 7 and a 1 and a 7 and a 1, got him a little bit looser through his muscles so that when she gave the exact same half halt, he didn't run into his own body, he could answer and come nicely on the bit. So Ziggy and Melissa and Tycho, thank you very much.
Thank you.